and welcome to D&D with Z and Z. Today we're going to be talking about those moments when you find inspiration in any kind of media, so books, movies, anything like that.
So this is going to be when you want to make the edgy dark elf that's definitely not Drizz't, when you want to use the trap of Indiana Jones, or the plot from Lord of the Rings, whichever works. So most GMs use this all the time, but we wanted to go over some things that worked quite well for us. And the first one for me, I always change names. Whether it's a movie or book or computer game, I'll always change the name a little bit. Even if you just flip a syllable or two, it works quite well to obfuscate what you're trying to copy.
For sure. If you've got a school for wizards and it's in a castle, people might not pick up on it, but if you start running into Harry's and Ron's and Hermione's, they're going to clue in.
Yeah. Another thing that works quite well is to use a quite light touch when you're copying from various settings and medias. If you want to steal a spell from Magicka, you can definitely do that, but maybe, only steal one or two, or change the name, or don't have the effect be quite the exact same. That just, again, obscures that you're stealing a little bit. Another thing is to stay quite flexible. If the players do something that wouldn't work in the setting you're copying from, try and do your best to roll with that particular punch. Just because they can't use telekinesis in Die Hard doesn't mean your players won't try it when you're in the car chase.
That's so true. I think for me, some of the things that really help are, no matter how much you loved the book or movie or video game, be sure to only steal one element at a time. So if you want to put Captain Hook in it, great. Do that. Don't also be in Neverland. Don't also have a flying boy with a fairy. Don't also have the plot be kids trying to be kids forever.
And I suppose one exception to this is if you're very clear with your players that you're stealing a setting or something like that, then it can be quite okay. Like if you're playing a Neverland campaign, great. But if you aren't and you're just, trying to use a scene or two, you don't have to copy everything.
Yeah. Try to treat it more as you're using it as inspiration, not as a script.
Mm-hmm.
On that note, if you do tell them, hey, we're going to be running around through Mordor, subvert their expectation. They know Mordor, presumably. They've probably seen Lord of the Rings and Hobbit. So subvert it. Like, okay, you're marching through this desolate, lava-filled scape, and you walk into an orcish diner? Like, throw them something they're not expecting, or else they'll do it for you, trust me. The other tip I'd have is stay obscure. If you do want to steal whole hog, like the entire book pretty much, make sure it's something no one else has seen or read. Especially, it's easy for me because my players aren't big readers, and I love fantasy books, so I have a huge variety of stuff I can nick.
Used to be my thing, I swear.
Yeah, it's true. So, of course, with tips and tricks and what's worked for us, we've, of course, learned a lot of the things that don't work. Some of the pitfalls that we have found especially frustrating as GMs for myself, I don't know if it holds true for you as well, but would be that if you're trying to take something quite to the letter, again, if you're following the entire book, for example, players don't know their lines, especially if it's something where you haven't told them or they're not aware that they're basically Harry Potter in this situation. You'll quite often run into things where they'll get really distracted by an NPC who wasn't important, or they'll kill someone who was supposed to be the big bad because they were a random hobo on the street, and PCs do that sometimes.
Mm-hmm. This is especially true if you are stealing a plot line. Oh, goodness. Especially for murder mysteries and that sort of thing, if you've seen a crime show, the players don't necessarily pick up on everything that the CSI team did. They're not necessarily crime scene investigators. And, it can be a bit hard to... It can be hard to bridge that gap between what the GM is thinking and what the players are thinking.
For sure, especially with the crime scene murder mystery example. Murder mysteries are really difficult to do. We're going to cover that in another video. But if you're copying a murder mystery you saw on TV or movie, pay attention, because 9 out of 10 times those things get solved because of a coincidence. And there's a very low chance your players are going to give you the opportunity to introduce the same coincidence, because you know they're just going to suddenly be like, yeah, that guy is very dead. It's probably the butler. Everyone's going to agree it's the butler, and they're all just going to go ham. So another big pitfall that can be really frustrating as a GM is what I call setting irreverence. And basically it's where you've decided to place your game in something fairly serious, like for example Panam with the capital from Hunger Games. There's a lot of different strong issues there. It's a very serious setting. Players, few and far between, tend to be serious and stay serious. The large majority of parties, at least the ones I've encountered, get goofy very quickly. And that can be really frustrating if you see it in your mind as this sad, serious, dark place, and they're running around making balloon animals out of sausages. Like, it just doesn't work that well.
And if you're a player trying to make a character based on someone, like for instance Drizz't, Drizzt's very dark, very edgy, and your fellow players are probably going to look at that and snicker a bit, because that's inherently kind of funny. That can be kind of tough to bear, especially if you were going for a serious vibe or theme. Having that carry over for the rest of the party is something you have to kind of agree on beforehand, or play so much to the hilt that it's probably not going to be fun anymore. And then as a GM as well, another thing that's happened to, I think, both of us once or twice is getting caught in the act. Especially if you're taking scenes from movies or plots from books. If one of your players has read or seen the same movie or book, then they might catch on. And not necessarily right away either. You have to kind of make the decision on the spot. Do you want to continue with the plot you were basing it off of, or do you need to change up? Because the player might know what's coming now, and if you were sticking too closely, then it's bad that they know your every move. But if you weren't sticking very closely and they convinced the rest of the party of a certain thing from the plot you're basing off of that you were not using, that can be really disappointing when that turns out to not be the case. And this does have something to do with how thoroughly you've prepped everything and how closely you're sticking to the lines. And then, of course, all of this should kind of be wrapped up in a discussion of railroading, because generally railroading is bad. You can use railroading well sometimes, but especially if you are using a previously established plot, your players are most likely going to want to play something a little differently or not make the same mistakes as the character in the book did. And you, as a GM, need to be able to roll with that and stay flexible and use a light touch, because otherwise you may as well be playing a single player game. You don't need the players here to read your book.
Yeah, just go reread the book again at that point.
Just reread the book again. That is most of what I think we have to say on the subject. You can definitely steal things from all forms of media that you intake, even if it's just a name, even if it's just a scene, even if it's an entire plot line. It's good to draw inspiration from a lot of sources, because it keeps your campaign diverse, and it takes a bit of the load off of you. It's a lot of work to GM, and take what help you can get. Thank you guys very much for tuning in and watching. I've been Zach.
I'm still Zenia.
And I hope your dice treat you well, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.